Hello, in today's episode I am joined by David Deacon and we are going to be talking about manager effectiveness and manager development. David, welcome.
Thank you, lovely to be here.
David, could you kick us off by giving us a little bit of a potted history of your career to date?
Sure. So I'm a chief people officer. That's what I do for the last 3 and a bit years. I've done that for a company called Active Payroll, who were a founder-led to PE-backed growth transformation story. Lots of fun. And so that's sort of what I do. Along the way, I picked up quite a lot of management development, leadership development, talent management, culture building, performance management, all of those kinds of talent topics. So that's the specialism. Mm-hmm. So I'm a kind of HR generalist with a fairly deep leadership and learning specialism. And I've been really lucky. Right? I've lived and worked in the US twice. I've lived and worked in Asia once. I've been across Europe. So yeah, it's been fantastic.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Really exciting.
Yeah, it has been. Has been.
And David, you recently wrote a book called The Self-Determined Manager,
Yes.
a manifesto for exceptional people
Yes.
managers.
Yes. Here it is.
So,
Look.
excellent. Good plug.
Right here. Yes.
We absolutely want to plug that.
Thank you very much.
Why did you write it? What drove you there?
Yeah. So I actually didn't write it recently.
My bad. Apologies.
No. I actually started it years and years ago. And I was just frustrated.
Yeah.
Frustrated and annoyed and irritated at how badly my colleagues were managing the people who worked for them. It was just that. And it seemed to me that they were clueless and they didn't know where to go to find out how to do it well. Mm-hmm. And it's quite simple. Mm-hmm. So for some reason, Hannah, I don't know what the reason was, I got it into my head that it was my mission to write that, and therefore a book seemed the obvious thing. And I love writing. Yeah. So a book seemed the obvious thing. It then took me 20 odd years probably to actually write it. Mm-hmm. I started it, left the manuscript behind when we went to Hong Kong, never got back to it because the children were growing up. Mm-hmm. So finally, actually when I was in the US, started writing again. Mm. And that was what became the book. Yeah. And the book and the training that then kind of goes with it, because much to my surprise, the world was not that excited by the arrival of the self-determined manager. And so yeah, I've been looking for ways to influence managers. Yeah. And it's not easy. No. It turns out it's not easy. No. One thing I would say, I got the title of the book wrong.
Oh, what should it have been?
I don't know, but it shouldn't have been that. It's too long. It's too hard. You can't. You have to look at your notes to remember what it's called, and it just that doesn't work. It needs to be snappier.
Well, that maybe can be V2.
That can be the next book.
Did you find, given how long it took you to write, that when you did go back to it after a number of years, you needed to do quite a lot of editing because the world had moved on? Or did you actually find that even though a significant period of time had passed, the principles still stood sound?
I love that question, Hannah. It was the second. Mm-hmm. I think very little has changed. Yeah. Actually. Yeah. And managers seem to be just as bad at managing now as they appeared to me to be 20 plus years ago.
And why do you think that is?
I think it's because we've done a really bad job at telling them what the job actually is. I think we've done that badly. And I think people like me in the leadership development profession have also said to leaders, don't be managers. We've kind of said, look, leaders do this. It's exciting, it's interesting, it's future focused, it's about vision and creating success, these things. Managers get things done, get tasks completed, delegate, have difficult conversations. So that's the dull, day-to-day operational stuff. That's managers. Mm-hmm. Leaders special, important. And I think in a way we were right to tell leaders that they were special. But in doing that, we told managers that they weren't.
Yes.
And so in a way, no one cares about the manager and no one thinks about it as a particularly important job. And so managers don't either.
Yeah.
So they don't know how, and no one really cares. And if you look on any bookshelf in Waterstones or Barnes & Noble or wherever you are, they're all books about leadership.
That's so true.
It is.
That's so true.
It is.
Yes.
So one of the things I could have done possibly is given the book leadership in the title, and it might have sold more. But then that would have been misleading.
Would it have solved the problem?
It
Exactly.
would not, and it would have sold to the wrong people. So
yes,
that wouldn't have
indeed,
worked.
indeed. So, David, what do you think are the biggest challenges managers face today?
So, you were kind enough to send me a couple of the questions that you were gonna ask me, and this was one of them.
Yeah.
So I've given this a bit of thought, and I think, with the greatest of respect, I think it's the wrong question.
Oh, okay. Go on.
Right. So I think what managers actually have, every manager, is a brilliant platform for doing something fantastic. And I think that's what was the same 20 years ago as is real now. And I think if we start a conversation about the challenges that managers have, we go down that kind of rabbit hole of how hard the job is. And I think that just perpetuates this sense of managers not being very good. So I feel as though the conversation should be, look at what a brilliant opportunity you have if you're a manager, even if you only have one person working for you, to shape something extraordinary.
Yeah.
You can do something fantastic for the people who work for you, awesome for the organization you work for. You can build a brilliant team. You can create individual success. You can nurture a ton of growth. You can get really high performance out of the people who work for you. And you can do that.
Yeah.
That's your opportunity.
Yeah. So
how lucky are you
yeah.
to sit in a seat with that opportunity? Every single manager on the planet has that.
And that rhetoric, that narrative, feels much more inspiring than one that I hear a lot, which is more managers are having so much devolved to them.
Yep,
their
absolutely.
to-do lists are getting bigger. We're asking so much of them, etc., etc.
And we are.
But it's interesting to turn it into actually we're giving you the autonomy and empowerment to make a real difference. But do you think we need to think about the support that we need to then make sure is there structurally to enable those managers?
Yeah, and you are absolutely right. It's going to get harder. So however hard an individual is finding their role right now, it's going to get harder. And the budget is going to get tighter, and the expectations are going to get higher, and the customers are going to get grumpier, and the clients are going to want things more quickly. And it's the same every year. Yeah. Every year you recognize it's going to get harder. So we just kind of need to stop with that. Middle managers have a hard time. The squeezed between leaders and people. Just forget it. That's not it.
Message.
It's not. So this idea of it's a platform. It's an opportunity to do something extraordinary. You have to live within the environment and the constraints and the challenges, but that's what makes it fun. But you are right. There needs to be more support, I think, to help managers to know what they need to do, because there's what they do, but really more importantly, there's the approach and the attitude that they take towards doing it, and we don't talk about that. We sometimes talk about delegation or performance management or difficult conversations or whatever it is that we decide they need. but we rarely talk about attitude and we rarely talk about approach. And that's actually, I think, the support that all managers could do with.
So what if there were two things, the impossible question, two things that organisations could do that would have the biggest impact on manager effectiveness? What would they be?
In addition to giving them all my book, or
well, let's say we've already given them all your book.
All right.
Given everyone a book.
Done the training.
Everyone some training.
Awesome. Well, in that case, I think there are two things, actually. I think one is elevate the importance of the impact of managers. And the other is help with awareness. So MasterCard, where I was the Chief Talent Officer for a bunch of years, did this really well. Every year there was a manager effectiveness survey, and every employee had to complete the survey, was invited to complete the survey, detailing their experience of being managed. And so the manager got feedback on how she or he was managing the team. And it was, lots of false positives, lots of false negatives. Right? This thing was not particularly valid for all of the reasons that everyone would understand. But it created an awareness in the organization that how I'm managed as an employee actually matters. And I can influence that in some way, by the way I answer the questions, by how I interact with my manager, by feedback I give outside of all of this. And it told the managers, we're going to pay attention. And we did, right? We paid a lot of attention to the scores, and we paid a lot of attention to progress up and down in the scores year on year, and we intervened when we thought there was a need.
And what did that intervention look like?
Usually coaching or training. Usually. Because that's a shift down means that something has gone wrong, and a shift up means there's something to be celebrated.
Absolutely.
So it was typically one of those two things.
And I guess just to pick up on that celebration of success point, kind of important across the board, but given the conversation we've already had around managers and what you said there around elevating the importance of the impact that they have you seen that be done really well, the celebration of managers' success? No.
I don't think so. Because it's really hard. It's really hard, and we feel as though if you call out some people, then others are not getting the recognition that they should get, and you're worrying that people are bigging up their manager because they've been coerced rather than because their manager really is good. It's really, really hard. Here's the thing with managers, in my view, almost everyone wants to be a good manager. Excuse me. Almost everyone wants to be a good manager. So they don't come into the role thinking, I'm going to be average. That'll be okay.
It's not a motivation problem.
It's not. And most of us want to be a great manager. And most of us are a little bit disappointed when we aren't. And so I don't know whether recognition as such makes a difference to that. I think feedback does. So I think the individual knowing how she or he is doing, that makes a difference. But whether organisation level recognition, manager of the year, manager of the month, I don't know. I mean, you see it, right? Retail still does quite a lot of that. But usually that's because there's fairly clear metrics that you can use to measure, to assess by.
Probably linked to store performance.
Probably.
And all of those sorts of things. Indeed.
Whereas just being a brilliant manager, very hard to assess, very much in the eye of the beholder. But if you work on the basis that everyone wants to be great at being a manager, then I think, again, you're just changing that. You're changing the tone about why focusing on this matters. It matters because you want to be good at this.
And have you ever seen or experienced a situation where you feel intervention is appropriate, maybe scores have gone down, but the manager doesn't necessarily agree that intervention is what is required? And I guess with these sorts of surveys, it's very easy to brush off low scores with, I'm not surprised. They don't like what I'm trying to get them to do at the moment, etc., etc. So how do you deal with that?
Well, a score, particularly on an annual survey, is just a moment in time, is just a single data point. And every manager works for a manager.
Yeah.
So in the end, you're kind of looking up the organization. Do you understand, are you as a manager of managers paying enough attention, doing enough coaching, getting your managers to be strong enough performers? So it's the whole picture. And that's just a single data point.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree. David, what role do you think technology can play in manager development or manager effectiveness?
I think I'm back in the same world, which is that management is the same as it's always been. And so great management is, regardless of the technology that you're using, it's just how you are with your team, how you are with your people, what expectations you set, what models you drive. So I'm not sure actually what the impact of technology is. It changes the medium. So we're all managing remotely as well as directly, and so that changes some of the ways in which you have to operate in order to be effective. And there's actually quite a lot of good work now done on including people who are almost always remote and sitting in their own place, not in your place. But fundamentally, being a great manager is still the same as it always was.
Do you think the rise of hybrid working and remote working has meant that managers have had to develop new skills?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. And that's been actually quite good, because I think one of the things that did was drove a focus on people's experience matters. Because you started to recognize that people were getting left behind. They were not switching on their cameras. They were not getting out of their pajamas. Whatever it was, you could tell that they were much less involved, much less engaged. And we rightly said to managers, you have to pay more attention. You have to be involved with your people more. So I think that paradoxically did have quite a good impact. And you see it, the really good managers are fantastic at making sure that no one gets left behind. They're really good at that. And that's partly because we've suggested they need to do that, and partly because that's their instinct. They were doing that anyway. They were doing that when everyone was in the office. Sometimes it's harder to spot the people who are getting left behind in those situations.
Indeed. You talked about instinct there. So do you think that's something that some people just have and are naturally very good at it? Other people have to work very hard to build it. How do they do that? What do they have to do to build those skills if it doesn't come naturally?
I think they just have to be very, very aware of the impact that they're having. I think honestly, it's that simple. It's just about knowing and thinking, ideally every day, about the impact that as a manager you're having. And most people don't think that they come into work, whether that's actually or virtually, and they think about what their manager thinks about them, and they think about the jobs they have to do, and they think about their pressures and their customers or clients or whatever those things are. They don't usually think, what kind of manager am I going to be today? What kind of team spirit am I going to curate today? Who am I going to help to be brilliant today? Who on the team is doing fantastically? Who's struggling? How is the team doing overall? How are we viewed? What's our reputation like? All these kinds of things. And so how am I going to act? How am I the manager of the team? How am I going to act in order to make a difference to the team today?
So it's almost a need to create reminders to constantly ask yourself those questions, whether it be literally something in some time and space in the diary where you have those questions that pop up on your calendar every week.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because the thing with a manager, we used to call them team leaders back in the day. The thing with the manager is it's in their gift to create that environment for their team. In fact, they create the environment for their team. that's what they do. It's kind of built into the job. And you know, when you've worked for a great manager, you felt really good about the team that you're in and the work that you do.
Yeah.
And you've felt your confidence lift, and you've felt that you can do extraordinary things, and you've enjoyed being in that team, and you look back and think that was a fantastic time.
Yeah.
I loved that. I loved my colleagues. I loved my team leader. All of that was fantastic, and I did great work.
Yeah.
And most of us have that experience somewhere along the line. And most of us also have the opposite experience, of course, which is when you worked in a team that was broadly unhappy, where people didn't feel confident. They felt that they were likely to get criticized. They were likely to get caught out. There was internal competition. There was a sense of, if I do well, this person's going to do badly, and that's okay. I'll win. I'll get their bonus, whatever. So all of those kinds of things. And it's the manager who's created those two environments. It's not the company.
Yeah.
Despite what we like to think. But brilliant teams exist in horrible companies.
Yeah. Yes, that's very true.
And horrible teams exist in fantastic companies.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's actually about what's the environment that the manager creates for the team.
I really like that. Yeah.
And that thing is what aware managers do consciously.
Yes, absolutely.
They consciously use all of the levers that they have to create a strong, positive environment and high performing.
Yeah.
Right? Because you can't be soft and be a great manager.
Indeed.
You have to push people.
What information do managers lack today that would make the biggest difference to their success, do you think?
I think, partly what I've just said.
Yeah.
Your job is to create an environment for your team of success, positivity, and outperformance. That's your job.
Yeah.
Your job is not to delegate, to coach, to get tasks done. Those are things that you need to do along the line. But fundamentally, the way you're going to really bring value is you're going to create that awesome team environment of high performance growth.
Yeah.
And then some form of measurement, feedback loops, awareness building, something that helps managers to understand when they're doing it well and when they're doing it poorly.
And those feedback loops, what have you seen done well and what have you seen done less well?
So I guess, again, I go back to MasterCard, that combination of the regular assessment.
Yeah.
And we also did quite a good job of elevating the importance of managers. So we had a monthly Managers Matter newsletter. This was relatively old tech. And we did try to showcase great managers, and we did a decent job, I think, of just making it a good thing to be a manager. And that I think made quite a difference. And the retention was high and the engagement was high. It's partly because it's a great business model and it's a great business, right? So that helps, of course it does. But I think that focus on creating it as an important role, just as leaders are important, managers matter, and that thing that actually quite worked. That quite worked.
Absolutely. What role can assessment play in manager development or manager effectiveness? Because they're kind of two slightly different things.
Yeah, I think I've been worrying about this. So if we accept for a moment that approach and attitude and skills and capabilities are kind of the three pillars that the best managers are successful on, you can't, the feedback loops help with the impact of the approach. You can probably get a little bit after attitude with assessment. And you can get a little bit after skills. In all honesty, I'm not sure. I'm not sure anyone has cracked assessments, really effective assessments for managers. 360 is probably about the closest, because at
Tapping
least
into
people
the
are talking about their experience
Yeah.
of being managed.
Tapping into that feedback loop.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm not. There has to be an answer,
What's your
and a
view?
smart organisation might well be able to come up with an answer, but I don't know what it is.
And what's your view on using assessment in this context to help managers better understand themselves so that they can better think about their relationship dynamics, so one-to-one with the team, but also the team dynamics, and better understand how they might need to change their approach to get the best out of different people.
Yeah, that's a good thought, actually. Yeah, a way of assessing the team dynamics as a way of helping managers to recognise where to focus. That's a good thought. That would make a difference.
Do you see much of that happen?
No.
And why do you think it doesn't?
Because we don't want to have to invest in it.
So it's going back to managers aren't that important.
Aren't that important?
So that's really problematic. That
yes,
attitude.
it actually is. But I think that's real. If you're going to invest in assessment, you're probably going to invest in leaders and high potentials. You're probably not going to spend money on your managers.
Do you think that should change?
I don't know. I don't know because I also think managing is a relatively simple task. So I actually think that most managers should be able to just get on with it. They should be able to spot when their team is doing well and when their team is doing poorly. They actually shouldn't need some kind of an assessment to recognize that the dynamic is off and they need to have some conversations with people, or they need to talk to the team. They need to confront issues. They shouldn't need something outside of the team to make that clear, just as they should have a plan for all of the individuals in the team. And that should be in their heads, and it should be common sense, and it should be rooted in what they see in the person, what they're good at, what their weaknesses are, all those things. They should have enough about them to be able to do that. Again, without investment in too much assessment. So if the organization does invest, fantastic.
Yeah.
Everyone is fortunate. Everyone is better as a result of it. But in organizations that don't, they can still, I think, expect their managers to be very good at spotting how the team is doing and spotting how the individuals are doing and adapting their behavior and their approach as needed to create that high performance.
Yeah, I think that's right in terms of we should have those expectations of managers. But I guess going back to the very top of our conversation, the reason you wrote your book was because you were so frustrated that people weren't doing a great job here.
And most people, I've done some research, McKinsey have done some research, others have done research. Most people are disappointed by their managers most of the time. So typically the numbers are somewhere between 75% and 85% of our managers are broadly poor.
Which is problematic,
25% are good to great.
Yeah.
It's definitely problematic.
Yeah.
It's absolutely problematic.
Yeah.
Because what's being left behind is productivity and performance. But most of us, if you think about your career, if you think about the managers who you've loved working for, you think about the managers you haven't loved working for, the chances are there's more in the haven't than in the have.
Indeed.
And in the have loved working for, you can name them, you can picture them. I watched you do it when we were talking about it. It's what we all do. We think about our best manager.
Yeah.
But it's the worst managers who we spend most time with in our careers. Isn't that ironic?
It's so ironic, but surely also that makes such a case for needing to invest in a manager population.
Yes.
Assessment or training or whatever it may be.
Totally.
So I wonder whether is it truly enough to just expect managers to do that? Do you think you need to intervene?
It can't
a little more.
It cannot be. But I don't. The other side of the problem. There's so many managers.
Indeed. So you need scalability. Which is a real challenge.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the solution to that is.
Yeah.
Because organizations rightly have a hierarchy of where they spend their money.
Indeed.
And managers are never going to be at the top of the hierarchy. They're just not. And so I'm almost wondering if the answer is to have people invest in themselves.
Oh, interesting.
And I don't quite know how that unfolds. But something about you've become a manager, you've been appointed. Here's how you can help yourself to be fantastic at that, to be someone's best manager. Because I like I said before, I genuinely think people do want to be really good managers. They don't want to be average or poor. But
then you need to then go back and solve the problem of the value attached to managers and make sure that value is perceived to be high.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I guess there is a philosophical question about where should the investment come from? Should it come from the organization that employs you? Or should it come from you as an individual? And if it comes from you as an individual, you are at least taking some ownership for your impact and effectiveness.
Interesting. So I guess equivalent of choosing to go and do some further education and get a qualification.
Exactly. Exactly. And not that hard, honestly, and not that time consuming, but needs attention. Needs attention. So I feel as though in the world there's something there about getting after individuals at the point at which they're given that responsibility and they're helping them to live up to that in the way that they would want to. There's something there, regardless of whether or not their organization invests in them, which it might, but the chances are it will not.
But step one, raise the bar in terms of expectations and value placed on that population.
And absolutely right. And of course, the place where great leaders learn to be great leaders is when they start being managers. So
step one on that journey.
It is step one. And so you learn, it's absolutely in your career development interests to learn how to be a great manager.
Indeed.
And if your team has a great reputation in the organization, that helps you too. And if they do great work, that helps you too. And so it all builds up. So it's absolutely in your interests to do that job super well. And to assume that your employer is not going to invest in your development. You're lucky if they do, but most do not.
Interesting. 2 final questions for you,
yes.
David. So firstly, what 3 top tips would you give organizations wanting to improve manager effectiveness?
Other than the book?
Yeah.
Okay. What 3 top tips? So go after awareness. Find the ways to make sure that managers know what doing the job really well involves, and make sure that they understand that it's about that environment that they're creating for their team. However you frame that in your organization, whatever terms you use, whatever that looks like, make it clear that the job is building that environment of success. So I'll go after that. I'd go after some kind of feedback loop. And again, MasterCard did this well. We did it reasonably well at Active Payroll, actually. That giving feedback to the managers so that they have some sense for how they're doing. And I guess the third is this thing about elevating the importance and the value of managers in the organization.
Yeah.
Celebrating them in some way, some form of managers matter.
Yes.
Some form of dialogue about that.
Yeah.
Just elevate the importance of the role.
Indeed.
So people know what attitude and approach they should take.
Yeah.
They get some feedback on how they're doing, and the organization is told that it matters. Yeah, that would do it.
Yeah, great summary. And then finally, what 3 top tips would you give managers wanting to improve as managers?
Okay, so the first is actually the same. The first is get aware. Just however you do it, get that awareness of what your approach needs to be. Use a daily checklist, a weekly checklist. Ask yourself hard questions. Read the book, whatever. Just get aware. Secondly, have a plan for the individuals on your team. Genuinely have a plan, not the company performance management, career development thing. That's important, but have some ambition for each of the individuals who work for you, and just give that a bunch of thought for what they could do, where they are now, how they could be great, how their careers could unfold. Just have a plan for each of them as individuals, and build that plan as a human. And I guess the third would be pay lots of attention to the team dynamic. Watch how they're working together or not, and watch how they're responding to you, because you know the way your manager is just makes a huge difference to your mood. If your manager is in a good mood on any given day, you feel pretty positive and optimistic and all the rest of it. If your manager's in a bad mood, or just isn't very engaged, doesn't say good morning to you, seems to be massively distracted, you worry that you've done something wrong, or the company's in trouble, or just generally something bad is going to happen. And people watch their manager for the cues and the clues and the stuff about what's going on, and managers just need to be really aware of that impact, and they need to really, really watch that, and think about that, because they are who we look at. We worry about our CEO or whatever, but we look to our manager to know how things are for the team, how things are for me as an individual, and so a manager needs to just pay attention to the signals she's sending all the time.
Absolutely. I really like that point 2 there around have a plan for each individual. That's not necessarily anything to do with the sometimes what feels like a box ticking exercise around corporate career planning and form filling out and I think that's really nice.
And it makes such a difference, because if you really have that, if you really feel that, it changes all of your discussions with that individual, because you're invested in them on a genuinely human level. You can actually say, I really want good things for you. I'm the person who worries the second most about your career. Assuming you're the one who worries the first most about your career, I worry the second most, and that just changes your relationship with them.
Indeed.
People will try much harder for you.
Indeed.
When you try much harder for them.
Yes, absolutely. David, thank you so much. It's
welcome.
Been an absolute pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you for the great questions.
We hope you've enjoyed today's episode of The Deep Dive. If you have, please remember to like and subscribe to stay tuned for all our latest content. If you want more information on any of the topics you've heard today, check out the show notes for case studies, resources, and articles. I've been Hannah Mullaney. See you next time on The Deep Dive.